Good morning, my friends. This is your seat at the table. Rick the Fat Man here. I just wanted to start off with, I missed last week having an entry because I had to do some dental work and the aftermath thereof. Also, I want to apologize for the simplistic style I'm using at the moment. Like I said, I bought a new laptop last month when I had an opportunity. I kind of jumped on it, which is a good thing. I followed my gut because the following week uh, anyway, it doesn't matter. We had a nice newer laptop. It's not quite the same as the one I'm used to using, so there's some issues with it. There's also some material that's on my old one that's not on this one, and I have to figure out how to transfer it over so I can make use of it here. Includes, a intro with music and so on and so forth, which has always been a work in progress for me. I mean, I don't have the resources and extensive time to devote to huge amounts of really top-notch quality editing and additions, so I do the best I can with what I have. The lion's share of people who view my material, of course, don't like my channel, or either don't like the channel, or i.e. they don't type like or enter like and or don't subscribe, which is perfectly understandable. But when I go and there's something different about YouTube's channels too, or their system, because in one aspect it'll tell me I've only got a handful of views on a particular video, and other than later there'll be hundreds of views, and in a couple cases there's thousands of views, but they don't always show up in the bean counter section. I know that I also have a number of videos that have had copyright strikes on them, mostly demonetizing. The whole channel's demonetized anyway, so that doesn't matter. But from what I'm understanding, that whenever something gets a copyright flag along with other kinds of flags, it tends to slow down uh, the chances of the video being popped up on other people's video or as suggestions for viewed material. So I'm guessing a lot of the views I get is from people typing and doing a search of a specific tag word that may or may not be included when I set up the backstop on these things. But this is all a work in progress, so it is what it is. That's a cliche term that I tend to like to use a lot. Uh, what we're looking at today is Lords of Middle-earth, Volume 3, Hobbits, Dwarves, Ents, Orcs, Trolls, etc., a fantasy game character compendium. And most of these I've done. This will be my second go around, so you might find a different version of this sitting somewhere, and that's perfectly understandable. So let's get on with this. Uh, Basically, it's a compendium of almost every known character or back character, NPC, or very roughly, vaguely mentioned in Tolkien's works, along with enough beta character fanfic fluff to fill out the book and make it worth your time and effort. Like I've said many times before, one of the things I like about Murph and the books is the readability. The fact is, I could spend an afternoon or a number of afternoons and bits and pieces of it reading through and finding all kinds of interesting material, and some of it I can utilize in games, and some of it just for the pure sake of videotaping. So this morning I got me a little thing of water. My voice tends to be scratchy first thing in the morning. Not a smoker, but with the missing teeth and some bad teeth, I have a tendency to get a dry mouth pretty quick. Anyhow, this was published in 1989. This is a first edition. Not that that makes a bit of difference. I know that there are several editions that have been added later to later versions. I don't know if there's a 2.0 version and one for another game system, but in doing a search for cover art so I could have it as thumbnail, which is consequently one of my issues with this laptop. The overhead camera that I'm using right now is a Logitech, and it's uploaded, and easily the computer can log in and use it, but there's software that went with this that's on my old computer, and I'm not quite sure how to transfer that over so I don't lose something, so I can't make my own thumbnail down shots like I intend to do with little props and stuff like that very well, easily until I figure out how to go and do that. So using Lords of Middle-earth, the introduction, abbreviations, guidelines, key to tables, definitions, citations, converting statistics, converting hits and bonuses, converting system statistics for any major fantasy role-playing system, FRP, converting stats, converting combat abilities, converting spells and table lists, notes on levels, it says here, when using certain level systems in GM, I find that the levels provided make characters too powerful for his world system. If this is the case, multiply the levels by a given 0.75 or 0.6, depending on your situation. This would reduce a 20th level character to a 15th or 12th level character, respectively. Or they would reduce, appropriate bonuses accordingly. Rollmaster skills in Lord of the Middle-earth 3. So, first section is titled, Part 2, Hobbits. And it gives us an overview of Hobbits, a Hobbit history, a breakdown of the 3 different classes or racial divisions of the Hobbits and what makes them different from each other. Hobbit nature, physical characteristics, culture and society, craftsmanship, warcraft, magic and religion. I mean, it's suggested in Lord of the Rings, in the novels, that hobbits are not warlike by nature, which is true, but the hobbits are like any other living, breathing beings. They can and will protect their own, and when it comes necessary or when cornered, and that taking that into account, usually the hobbits are more often using short swords and daggers, slings, short bows. They tend to favor archer units and scout units or above frontline units. Obviously, a skirmish line of pike carrying hobbits is not going to fare well against pretty much everybody else unless they're dealing with wolves or something like that. So you're not going to see that kind of traditional battle formation. They're sidestepping work for a minute, going into Forgotten Realms. There's a number of characters and NPC character Gs that I've seen over the years that taken halflings to a different level, and it shows that they can be used creatively in warlike situations. If you want to put together a striker unit that is fast moving, or like I said, mounted archers, and occasionally actually seen armor-wearing, mace-wielding hobbits, which have their own disadvantages and advantages, of course. Magic and religion, and we get into that character, Glossy. So Barbarous took the one that knocked the head off a goblin, then at golf, elbow dragons, of course. Blanco, one of the founders of the Shire. Eleanor Gamgee, Frodo, of course, which they've got almost 2.5 pages devoted to Frodo, which is appropriate. Gollum, and you know, Gollum was a hobbit. Lorville, Bracegirdle, Sackville, Bagginses, Merry and Pippin, Lothil, Sackville, Marcho, the other founder, Paladin took, Peregrine took, Samwise, all their stats and statistics and other things that you might wish to, if you need to use them. Tolman, Cotton, Tobal Holder, and we got short description. So we got a whole bunch of small paragraph size entries under Hobbit names, a few pictures, all their stats over here, of course. So if you wanted to dip in and pull up some random characters for your role-playing game, this was one of these things that I've been fond of over the years because I've utilized this in my other fantasy setting game systems as a quick reference for finding NPCs for specific. So if I want a halfling in a Forgotten Realms campaign, I just need a temporary whatever, I can go in here and whip up one of these characters and just change the name slightly and make it sound like they fit into D&D style. So, you know, there is what it is. Lots of different entries in here, quite a few. Alphabetical order. like, you know, if you're familiar with the novels and the scouring of the Shire, the chapters leading up to it, Frodo and his group come back home, and they're encountering a small contingent of would-be sheriffs at the gates to the river leading, you know, the Brandywine in order to get into the Shire, etc., etc. One of them's a fellow named Robin Smallborough. Level 3, Client Harefoot. Robin had taken a position as a sheriff because it was an easy job. When Lothal Sackville Baggins came to hire, Robin unwillingly left Hobbiton to become part of the East Farthing troop. Sam referred to Robin as Cock Robin. While Robin liked to inside of a tavern as much as anyone and resented Lothal's tyranny, he merely thought quietly about what it would take to dispose of the chief, for he was too fearful to instigate anything. In the end, he reluctantly cooperated with the company Hobbits by assisting them in their approach to the beleaguered Shire. So, and his stats would be, you know, in here. So, good stuff. Then we come on to chapter 5, or section 5, Dwarves. The fathers of the 7 tribes, the history of the folk, founding of the Cattle original strife between the Dwarves and the Elves, Volgast and Norgrod, the Golden Years, the Second Age, migration of Thundrels, Elves, Lords of the Gifts, i.e. the Sauron, War and the naming of Moria, the fate of the 7 Rings, the coming of the Balrog, Tale of Thor, I think that's Thorin's grandfather, war against Zog and his orcs, the loss of Durin's Ring, Thorin II's quest to Erebor, Balin and the return to Moria, the end of the 3rd Age. So we got a lot of information here. Talks about some of the lesser tribes, and so some of this is Tolkien barely scratched the surface. He acknowledged that there were 7 tribes, but the information on we know of 4 of the 3. The other 3 were kind of left vague or not at all, and so the creators and writers, of course, had to step in and come up with their own stories. The struggle for the Nulgair, the Thorns, and the Sellers folk, the founding of Rook. It said here, while Durin's folk is the oldest, most noble of the Dwarven lines, 6 other tribes of the Nurgum deserve mention. They include the lines of the original Dwarven fathers: Bever the Swift, Dwalin, Zar the Cold, Zelor, Druin the Proud, and Baron the Scarred. Bever's people were the first to leave the homelands. They went into the south and built their homes in the Yellow Mountains, etc., etc., etc. So it goes on and gives some information. There's a map of their migration of the early days, the quest for the mirror, the 2 tribes of the east, coming of Mauer, the conquest of Uruk, Dwarven nature, physical characteristics, manner, dwarf women, the Khazid language, worship and ritual, the age of the hammer. Age of the Hammer is Uruk's most glorious day, being with the rise of Uruk is one of the 3 missing tribes, and it's their kingdom in the Yellow Mountains. Durin's folk, Dwarven warcraft, Dwarven technology, Dwarven tribe. I'm going to stop for a minute on that warcraft and technology thing. If you've seen the extended cuts of the Battle of 5 Armies, and there's Dwarven war chariots and these spinning ballista shields, if you will, that they launch to help negate the highly accurate elven bowmen. And some people poo-pooed those scenes, and some of them were cut out of the initial video release, but were included in the obviously the extended cut, or we wouldn't have seen them, or you can see those short clips on YouTube videos on YouTube. The thing about those is while to me that's an accurate representation of what a true Dwarven battle line would look like and how they would behave, to how their version of having a cavalry would potentially look like, and their clever use of machinery, siege weapons, and so on and so forth. So seeing those spinning ballistas being fired that knock out thousands of arrows as they fly through and eventually do damage to the opposing side isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. And we know that dwarves are technical group. They do like technology. They do utilize quite a bit of advanced techniques and machinery and keep developing more. Unlike some races, the humans will catch up to that in time, but the dwarves, it's a natural inclination for them. So I think that's appropriate and not to be taken lightly. The Dwarven trade, dwarf character, glossary, of course, pretty much all the main Dwarven mentions in all of Tolkien's works are in here with additional add-ons, so on and so forth. You know, like we see Bombur. Bombur was the fat dwarf that went with Thorin to the adventure of trying to retake Erebor, and he falls in an enchanted river. He has to be carried around by his companions. They're not all, you know, he was probably meant to be some sort of comic relief or abject lesson, but he was an important member. In the movie, he actually seems to do a lot more with his girth and his drive. We got our stats for him. According to the Merp people, he's level 6. He's a profession as a warrior fighter, home of the Blue Mountains, later Erebor, and descendant of the dwarves of cousin Bombur, was not of Durin's line. After Smog, Bombur lived in Erebor, and we know that he got so fat that he needed 6 dwarves to lug him around. It just makes you wonder that there wasn't so much more going on behind that particular person's backstory and why he was there. And I tend to don't think that warrior fighter as a profession was appropriate. I think it was implied that he was either a trader, some kind of merchant, or a toy maker of some sort. He partially helped funded Thorin's campaign, or funded his foray to go back and try to recover, or at least to recover some of his contents anyway. But Glimli, Nain first, Roland, Thorin the second, and we get into many more of the smaller, like I said, paragraph size entries and their stats. So once again, this makes for a good reference book for having a on-the-spot fly of a needed character for a situation or an encounter, an NPC, so on and so forth. And we also have a brief section or subsection on the petty dwarves. The Nigoth Niben are a lesser branch of the Khazad, banished from the great dwarven cities of the east in the elder days, mistaken by elves of the Bellard for evil creatures of Morgoth. They were for many years hunted and slain. This time of persecution weighed ever heavily on their hearts, and from it grew bitterness and hatred for the Quinde. Only Orcish tribes are more scorned than the petty dwarves. So they got the history. I know that there's a module that I overcame with the Vast Horn that's in southern Arnor that deals with a last remaining holdout of the petty dwarves and their sad, if not twisted, story. So that's what we got here. Their nature, petty dwarven character glossary. So a few key NPCs and petty dwarf characters. And we got petty dwarven short and descriptive glossary, with some additional NPC petty dwarfs. Then we got the Umli, like the men of Losna. Of Lossus, the Umli are masters of far north. They live in the woods and highlands east of Lossus, in the bitterly cold regions of the north central Middle Earth. Basically, Eskimos are their versions thereof. So the original of the Umli is somewhat confused. They are known as half dwarves and descend from a union of men and dwarves that took place after the awakening of Aulu's folk during the late First Age. This commingling of blood occurred as a result of a curse of the valiant wife of. There's a story there. Anyway. And then we got a section on Ents, Entish history, the guards of the Ent lives, Entish nature, breaking Isengard, religion and magic, Entgrots, form of nature magic, Entish character glossary, leaf block, quick beam, key elvish characters, and then a handful of smaller secondary ones. We have a section on orcs, had a whole book on orcs by themselves, and they pop up in a couple different source books / adventure modules too, in addition to this material. But a lot of it's just duplicated material. Some of it is different. So, like the entry for Gundabad that we have has quite a bit of information in there, but it's traditionally geared towards the orcs of Gundabad and their habits and story and etc. etc. So the origin of the half-orc, origin of the Urkai, origin of orcs in their form, which is now debated as to how that was, whether they were intentionally created or that they were twisted shadows of captured elves. Orcish history, which there's a lot of. In some aspects, the history of Middle Earth is the history of the Orcish race. I mean, they are pretty much present in every major war fought between good and evil. Minions of the Dark Lord, either Morgoth or Sauron, doesn't matter. They also have their own independent outfits that run around. Some that are, are beholden or sworn to others entities, such as the orcs that Saruman unleashes on Rohan. So things of that nature. Orcish nature, Orcish language, key orcs. Bunch of good NPC material in here too. Secondary orcs, trolls, troll varieties, half trolls, troll character glossary, etc., etc. Then we get into part 3, using high-level characters, selecting high-level characters, balancing the use of powerful characters, background personality, equipment, magic, generations, so on and so forth. This is mostly for NPC stuff. So obviously, if your characters are, or your player characters are low level, they shouldn't really run into, or you shouldn't challenge them with something that's 3 times their level capacity or their abilities, because they're likely to lose, and badly. So having them run across one of the Nazgul is foolhardy, unless it's a very brief, from a distance kind of encounter, something to add drama or spice or a fear element. Let them know that they're being pursued, or they're hunted, or that they drew the interest of that kind of thing. It's a matter of perspective and how you want to play into it. I could go into quite a bit on that subject altogether by itself, but then we would be running the video way over it. And frankly, most people have their own opinions on it. And maybe I'll get around to doing something someday if I remember. Anyway, this is your seat at the table, and this is Rick, the Fat Man. Till next time, keep studying.